The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Kensington Palace as Kate sat at the breakfast table with her 3 children. Prince George was carefully spreading marmalade on his toast, while Princess Charlotte giggled at something Prince Louis had said. The scene was perfectly ordinary, filled with the warm chaos that comes with any family breakfast. Kate smiled as she watched her children, enjoying these precious quiet moments before their busy day would begin. William had just returned from his morning jog around the palace grounds. His hair was still damp from his shower, and he was reaching for his coffee when his phone began to ring. The sound cut through the cheerful morning chatter, and Kate noticed how William paused when he saw the unknown number on his screen. He usually let unknown calls go to voicemail, but something made him answer this one. His voice was warm and professional as he said hello. Kate continued helping Louis with his breakfast, but she could not help noticing how William's expression began to change. His eyebrows drew together in concern, and he moved away from the table to hear better. The children kept eating and talking, unaware that their father was receiving news that would change their entire day. The caller was a nurse named Helen from a small hospital in northern England. Her voice was gentle but urgent as she explained why she was calling the palace so early. She told William about a little boy named Tommy who was a patient in their pediatric ward. Tommy was only 8 years old, the same age as Prince George, and he had been fighting cancer for 3 long years. The treatments had been difficult, and despite everyone's best efforts, the doctors had told his family that Tommy did not have much time left. Helen's voice became even softer as she continued. She explained that Tommy had one special wish that kept him going through his hardest days. More than anything in the world, he wanted to meet Prince William and Princess Kate. Tommy had been following their family closely, reading every story about them in the newspapers his mother brought him. He knew all about their children and had even drawn pictures of the royal family that covered the walls of his hospital room. William listened carefully as Helen described Tommy's incredible spirit. Despite being so sick, Tommy spent his days making colorful bracelets to sell to visitors and hospital staff. He used the money to buy small gifts and treats for other children in the hospital who were also fighting serious illnesses. The nurses had never seen anything like Tommy's determination to help others even when he was struggling himself. Helen's voice cracked slightly as she explained that Tommy's condition had gotten worse in recent days. The doctors believed he only had a few days left, maybe a week at most. Tommy's parents had been hesitant to call the palace, knowing how busy the royal family must be. But Tommy had been asking about his wish every day, and they finally decided to try. They knew it was probably impossible to arrange a royal visit on such short notice, but they had to try for their brave little boy. William felt his throat tighten as he listened. He looked across the breakfast table at his own children, healthy and happy, and he could not imagine what Tommy's parents were going through. He could hear the hope in Helen's voice mixed with the understanding that she was probably asking for something that could not happen. Without hesitation, William told Helen that he and Kate would be there as soon as possible. He could hear her sharp intake of breath, followed by tears of relief and gratitude. She had not really expected them to say yes, especially so quickly. William asked for the hospital's address and Tommy's room number, promising they would arrive before the afternoon was over. As William ended the call, he turned to see Kate watching him with concern. She had heard enough of the conversation to know something important had happened. The children were still eating breakfast, chattering about their plans for the day, completely unaware that everything was about to change. William walked back to the table and sat down beside Kate. In a quiet voice, he told her about the call and about Tommy's wish. Kate's eyes immediately filled with tears as she listened to the story of the brave little boy who was fighting such a big battle. She did not need to think about her answer. Looking at her own children, she knew exactly what they had to do. Within minutes, Kate was making phone calls to cancel their scheduled appointments for the day. Their assistants were surprised by the sudden changes, but quickly worked to rearrange everything. William called their driver to prepare the car for an immediate trip to northern England. The children asked why their parents seemed so serious all of a sudden, and Kate gently explained that they needed to visit a special little boy who needed their help. As the palace staff rushed to make arrangements, Kate went upstairs to gather a few things for their unexpected journey. She wanted to bring something special for Tommy, something that would make him smile. Walking through the children's playroom, she spotted a soft teddy bear that Prince Louis had recently outgrown. It was brown and cuddly, with kind eyes that seemed perfect for a little boy who needed comfort. The morning that began so peacefully had transformed into something much more important. Kate and William both knew that meeting Tommy would be one of the most meaningful things they would do all year. As they prepared to leave, they felt a mixture of sadness for what Tommy was facing and determination to make his wish come true in the most beautiful way possible. The black car pulled away from Kensington Palace just 2 hours after William had received the phone call that changed their day. Kate sat in the passenger seat, carefully holding the soft brown teddy bear she had chosen for Tommy. She had also packed a small bag with some books and games that her own children enjoyed, hoping Tommy might like them too. The palace staff had worked quickly to clear their schedules, and now they were driving north through the English countryside on their unexpected mission of kindness. William focused on the road ahead, but his mind kept returning to the conversation with Nurse Helen. He could not stop thinking about Tommy, a little boy the same age as George, who was facing something no child should ever have to face. The drive would take them through small villages and rolling hills, past farms and forests that looked peaceful in the afternoon sunlight. It was hard to believe that somewhere ahead, in a small hospital, a brave little boy was waiting for them. Kate gazed out the window as they passed through towns she had never visited before. These were places where ordinary people lived their daily lives, far from the grand palaces and formal ceremonies that filled her usual schedule. She thought about Tommy's parents and how terrifying it must be to watch their child suffer. As a mother herself, Kate could barely imagine the strength it would take to stay positive and hopeful in such circumstances. The couple talked quietly as they drove, sharing their thoughts about what they might say to Tommy and his family. They wanted to bring joy and comfort, but they also felt nervous about meeting a child who was so sick. Neither of them had much experience with seriously ill children, and they worried about saying the wrong thing or making Tommy feel worse somehow. Kate suggested they should just be themselves and follow Tommy's lead in their conversation. As they traveled further north, William told Kate more details about Tommy's story that Nurse Helen had shared during their phone call. Tommy had been diagnosed with cancer when he was only 5 years old, just starting school like other children his age. Instead of playing in the playground and learning to read, Tommy had to spend his days in hospital rooms receiving treatments that made him feel sick and tired. But according to Helen, Tommy never complained or felt sorry for himself. The most amazing thing about Tommy was how he used his time in the hospital to help other children who were also sick. He had learned to make colorful bracelets using threads and beads, working slowly with his small fingers even when the treatments made his hands shake. Tommy sold these bracelets to visitors and hospital staff, using every penny he earned to buy small gifts for other young patients. He bought coloring books, small toys, and treats to share with children who were having bad days. Kate felt tears in her eyes as she listened to William describe Tommy's incredible generosity. Here was a little boy who had every reason to be angry or sad about his situation, but instead he chose to spend his energy making other people happy. She thought about her own children and how they sometimes complained about small things like having to eat vegetables or go to bed early. Tommy's example made her realize how much her family had to be grateful for. The hospital was located in a small town that most people had probably never heard of. As they drove through the main street, Kate noticed the shops and cafes looked quiet and ordinary. There was a small park with swings and slides where healthy children were playing with their parents. The sight made both Kate and William think about Tommy, who might never get to play in a park like that again. When they finally arrived at the hospital, it looked much smaller than the grand medical centers in London that they were used to visiting for official engagements. This was a community hospital that served local families, with simple brick walls and small windows. But Kate and William knew that inside this modest building, extraordinary things happened every day. Doctors and nurses worked to save lives. Families gathered to support each other, and children like Tommy showed incredible courage in the face of impossible challenges. They parked the car and sat for a moment, both feeling the weight of what they were about to do. This was not a formal royal visit with speeches and ceremonies. This was simply two parents going to meet a child who needed to know that people cared about him. Kate clutched the teddy bear a little tighter, and William took a deep breath. Together, they walked toward the hospital entrance, ready to meet the remarkable little boy who had changed their entire day with a single phone call. The hospital corridors smelled like disinfectant and floor polish, a familiar scent that Kate and William recognized from their previous visits to medical facilities, but this time felt completely different. They were not here for a formal royal engagement with photographers and prepared speeches. They were simply two people who wanted to bring happiness to a sick child. Nurse Helen met them at the main entrance, her face glowing with excitement and disbelief that they had actually come. Helen was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She had worked in the pediatric ward for 15 years and had seen many difficult cases, but Tommy was special. As she led Kate and William through the hospital hallways, she whispered stories about Tommy's daily life. She told them how he always said good morning to every nurse and doctor, how he shared his breakfast cookies with other children, and how he never forgot to ask about everyone's families. The pediatric ward was painted in cheerful colors with cartoon characters on the walls. Drawings made by young patients were displayed proudly alongside get-well cards from local schools. Kate noticed how the nurses had tried to make the space feel less like a hospital and more like a place where children could still be children. There were toy boxes in the corners and colorful blankets on the beds, small touches that showed how much the staff cared about their patients. As they walked down the hallway toward Tommy's room, Helen explained that Tommy had been too excited to sleep the night before. When she had called to tell his parents that the prince and princess were actually coming to visit, Tommy had burst into tears of joy. He had spent the morning making sure his room was tidy and had even combed his hair with extra care. His mother had helped him choose his favorite pajamas, the ones with rockets and stars that made him feel brave. Tommy's room was at the end of the corridor, and Kate could see colorful decorations covering the door. When they got closer, she realized these were drawings that Tommy had made himself. There were pictures of Kensington Palace, portraits of the royal family, and even drawings of the children's dogs. Tommy had used crayons and markers to create his own gallery of royal artwork, each picture showing remarkable detail for such a young artist. Helen knocked gently on the door and called out Tommy's name. A small voice answered from inside, telling them to come in. When the door opened, Kate and William saw a little boy sitting up in his hospital bed, his eyes wide with amazement. Tommy was smaller than they had expected, made fragile by years of medical treatments, but his smile was absolutely radiant. He looked exactly like the kind of child who would spend his time helping others instead of feeling sorry for himself. Tommy's mother sat in a chair beside his bed, and she stood up quickly when Kate and William entered. Her eyes filled with tears as she thanked them over and over for coming to see her son. Tommy's father was there too, a quiet man who seemed overwhelmed by the kindness of these royal visitors who had driven so far to meet his boy. The small room suddenly felt full of emotion and love as the two families met for the first time. Kate approached Tommy's bed slowly, not wanting to startle him or make him feel overwhelmed. She sat down in the chair that his mother had vacated and smiled warmly at the brave little boy. Tommy stared at her in wonder, as if he could not quite believe she was really there. Kate pulled the soft brown teddy bear from her bag and offered it to Tommy, telling him that Prince Louis had especially wanted him to have it. Tommy's face lit up as he accepted the bear, hugging it close to his chest. He told Kate that it was the most beautiful teddy bear he had ever seen, and that he would treasure it forever. William knelt down beside the bed so he could be at Tommy's eye level, and the little boy immediately began chattering about all the drawings he had made. He pointed to each picture on his walls, explaining what they showed and asking if he had gotten the details right. The most remarkable thing about Tommy was how he made Kate and William feel completely comfortable. Despite being so young and so sick, he had a natural ability to put others at ease. He asked about their children, wanting to know if George liked football and if Charlotte enjoyed drawing like he did. He seemed genuinely interested in their answers, listening carefully to every word they said. Tommy showed them his collection of handmade bracelets, each one carefully crafted with different colored threads. His small fingers moved slowly as he explained his technique, but his pride in his work was obvious. He told them about the other children in the hospital who had bought his bracelets, and how happy it made him to know his creations were helping to pay for small gifts and treats for other patients. As they talked, Kate and William began to understand why Nurse Helen had described Tommy as extraordinary. Here was a child who had every reason to be frightened and sad, but instead he radiated joy and kindness. His positive spirit filled the small hospital room, making everyone around him feel uplifted and inspired. They realized they had come to comfort Tommy, but he was actually comforting them with his incredible strength and beautiful heart. After they had been talking for about an hour, Kate and William began to realize their visit was coming to an end. They did not want to tire Tommy too much, and they knew the nurses needed to continue with his medical care. The little boy seemed to sense that they would be leaving soon, and his expression became more serious. He looked down at his hands, fidgeting with the edge of his blanket, as if he was gathering courage to say something important. Tommy's mother noticed her son's change in mood and asked gently if everything was okay. Tommy nodded but continued looking down, clearly wrestling with some internal decision. Kate leaned forward in her chair, sensing that Tommy had something special he wanted to share. She spoke softly, encouraging him to tell them whatever was on his mind. Her gentle voice seemed to give Tommy the confidence he needed. With careful movements, Tommy reached under his pillow and slowly pulled out a small cloth bag. His hands shook slightly, not from nerves, but from the medication that sometimes made his muscles weak. Kate and William watched patiently as Tommy opened the bag and revealed 3 beautiful bracelets, each one more intricate than the ones they had already seen. These were clearly different from his other work, crafted with extra care and attention to detail. Tommy's voice was barely above a whisper as he explained what he had been working on. For the past several weeks, even on his worst days when the treatments made him feel terrible, he had been secretly creating these 3 special bracelets. Each one was designed specifically for Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis. Tommy had used his favorite colors and had carefully woven each child's initial into the pattern using golden thread that his mother had brought him. Kate felt her eyes fill with tears as Tommy held up each bracelet and explained his design choices. For Prince George, he had used blue and silver threads because he thought those were strong, princely colors. Princess Charlotte's bracelet was pink and purple with tiny silver beads because Tommy thought she would like something pretty and sparkly. Prince Louis's bracelet was green and yellow with red accents because Tommy had read that little boys like bright, happy colors. The amount of work that had gone into each bracelet was incredible. Tommy's mother later explained that he had been working on them every day, even when his hands hurt from the treatments, and he could barely hold the thread. On days when he felt too sick to sit up, he would lie in bed and carefully add a few more stitches to one of the bracelets. It had taken him weeks to complete all 3, working slowly and patiently, despite his pain and fatigue. William knelt down beside Tommy's bed again, clearly moved by the child's thoughtfulness and generosity. He gently took the bracelets from Tommy's small hands, examining each one carefully and praising the beautiful craftsmanship. Tommy beamed with pride as William pointed out specific details and asked questions about how he had created certain patterns. The little boy explained his techniques enthusiastically, happy to share his knowledge with someone who appreciated his work. Kate was struggling to control her emotions as she watched this exchange. Here was a child who was fighting for his life, spending his precious energy creating gifts for children he had never met. Tommy had thought about each of her children individually, choosing colors and designs he thought they would enjoy. The love and care he had put into each bracelet was overwhelming, and Kate knew her children would treasure these handmade gifts forever. Tommy's parents watched their son with obvious pride and love. His father wiped tears from his eyes as he listened to Tommy explain his creations to the royal visitors. His mother smiled through her own tears, remembering all the hours Tommy had spent working on the bracelets, even when he felt terrible. They had watched their brave little boy pour his heart into these gifts, never complaining about the difficulty of the work or asking for help with the intricate details. William promised Tommy that he and Kate would personally deliver the bracelets to their children that very evening. He described how excited George, Charlotte, and Louis would be to receive such special, handmade gifts. Tommy's face glowed with happiness as he imagined the royal children opening his presents and maybe even wearing the bracelets he had made just for them. Kate asked Tommy if he would mind if she took some pictures of the bracelets to show her children before giving them their gifts. Tommy nodded eagerly, even asking if he could pose with the bracelets for one of the photos. Kate carefully arranged the 3 bracelets on Tommy's bedside table and took several pictures, making sure to capture the beautiful details of Tommy's work. As Kate and William prepared to leave, Tommy made one more request that surprised them both. He asked if they would please tell George, Charlotte, and Louis that he hoped they would think of him sometimes when they wore their bracelets. He wanted them to know that even though he had never met them, he cared about them and hoped they were happy and healthy. His simple, heartfelt message brought fresh tears to Kate's eyes. The unexpected gifts had transformed their visit into something even more meaningful than they had imagined. Tommy had given them much more than beautiful bracelets. He had given them a lesson in generosity, showing them how someone could create beauty and joy even in the midst of suffering. As they said their goodbyes, Kate and William knew they would never forget this remarkable little boy and his incredible gifts of love. Just as Kate and William were gathering their things to leave Tommy's room, the little boy made one more request that caught them completely off guard. Tommy looked toward the wall that separated his room from the next one and asked if they might have time to meet his best friend Sarah. His voice carried a note of concern as he explained that Sarah was in the room right next door and had been feeling very sad lately. Tommy worried about her being alone so much of the time. Kate and William exchanged glances, both immediately understanding that this was important to Tommy. They had already spent more time at the hospital than planned, but seeing the hope in Tommy's eyes made their decision easy. William nodded and told Tommy they would be honored to meet his friend. Tommy's face brightened with relief and gratitude, and he called out toward the wall, telling Sarah that she was about to have some very special visitors. Nurse Helen led them to the room next door, explaining quietly that Sarah was 9 years old and had been in the hospital for almost as long as Tommy. The 2 children had become inseparable friends, supporting each other through the difficult treatments and long, boring days when they felt too sick to do much of anything. Sarah was more shy than Tommy, Helen warned them, but she was equally brave and had been following Tommy's example by trying to help other patients whenever she could. When they knocked on Sarah's door, a small voice told them to come in. Sarah was sitting up in her bed, but unlike Tommy, she seemed overwhelmed by the idea of meeting the royal visitors. Her mother sat beside her, gently encouraging her daughter to say hello. Sarah had lost most of her hair from the treatments, and she wore a colorful knitted hat that her grandmother had made for her. Her eyes were large and serious in her thin face, but Kate could see intelligence and strength there. Kate approached Sarah's bed slowly, the same way she had with Tommy. She spoke in a gentle voice, telling Sarah how much Tommy had talked about her and how he clearly cared about her very much. Sarah's expression softened at the mention of her friend, and she began to relax slightly. Kate sat down in the chair beside Sarah's bed, making herself comfortable as if she planned to stay for a while. Sarah was quieter than Tommy, but once she began talking, Kate and William discovered she had dreams and plans just like any other child her age. Sarah told them she wanted to be a teacher when she grew up, and she had been practicing by helping younger children in the hospital with their reading and math homework. Even though she was fighting her own battle with illness, Sarah made time to tutor other young patients who had fallen behind in their schoolwork. William was impressed by Sarah's dedication to learning and teaching. She showed them a collection of books she kept beside her bed, many of them about teaching methods in child development that seemed quite advanced for a 9-year-old. Sarah explained that her favorite nurse had been bringing her these books from the hospital library, and she spent hours reading about how to help children learn better. Her dream was to have her own classroom someday where she could make learning fun and exciting. Kate asked Sarah about the stories she had been writing, something Tommy had mentioned during their visit. Sarah's cheeks turned pink with embarrassment, but she shyly admitted that she had been creating stories to tell the younger patients when they felt scared or lonely. She had written tales about brave animals and magical adventures, stories designed to help children forget about their pain and fear for a little while. Sarah kept her handwritten stories in a special notebook that she carried with her everywhere. The stories were remarkable for someone so young. Sarah had created characters that faced difficult challenges, but always found ways to overcome them through friendship, courage, and kindness. The car pulled away from the small hospital as the late afternoon sun began to cast long shadows across the parking lot. Kate and William settled into their seats for the journey back to London, but the atmosphere was completely different from their morning drive north. The excitement and nervous energy they had felt earlier was replaced by a heavy quietness as they both processed what they had just experienced. Kate carefully placed Tommy's handmade bracelets in a special box she had brought, making sure they would not be damaged during the trip home. William drove slowly through the small town, taking one last look at the community where Tommy and Sarah lived when they were not in the hospital. He saw the school they probably attended when they were healthy enough, the playground where they might have played with friends, and the shops where their families did their everyday errands. It was strange to think that in this ordinary-looking place, two extraordinary children were fighting battles that most adults could never imagine facing. As they reached the main road that would take them back to London, Kate finally broke the silence. Her voice was soft and thoughtful as she tried to put into words what she was feeling. She told William that meeting Tommy and Sarah had changed something inside her, though she was not sure exactly what. These two children had shown a kind of courage and selflessness that made her own problems seem very small in comparison. William nodded, understanding exactly what Kate meant. He had been thinking about his own children during the drive, imagining George, Charlotte, and Louis in hospital beds like Tommy and Sarah. The thought was almost unbearable, and it made him realize how much he had been taking for granted. Every healthy day with his children was a gift that he had not fully appreciated until now. Tommy and Sarah had reminded him how precious and fragile life really was. Kate held the box containing Tommy's bracelets on her lap, thinking about the hours of work and love that had gone into creating them. She tried to imagine Tommy working on the bracelets during his worst days, when he felt too sick to eat or play, but still found the strength to create something beautiful for children he had never met. The dedication and generosity required for such an act seemed almost impossible to believe, yet she had seen the proof with her own eyes. They talked about Sarah's dreams of becoming a teacher and how determined she was to help other children, even while fighting her own illness. William mentioned how impressed he had been by Sarah's maturity and intelligence, qualities that would certainly make her an excellent teacher if she got the chance to pursue her dream. Kate was already planning the teaching materials she would send to Sarah, wanting to provide everything the young girl needed to continue learning and growing. The countryside rolled past their windows as they drove south, but neither Kate nor William paid much attention to the scenery. Their minds kept returning to the small hospital room where two children were spending what might be their last days, thinking about how they could help others. It seemed impossible that people so young could possess such wisdom and strength, yet Tommy and Sarah had demonstrated both qualities during their visit. Kate found herself thinking about her own children and wondering what lessons she should be teaching them about courage, kindness, and gratitude. George, Charlotte, and Louis had comfortable lives filled with privileges and opportunities that most children could only dream about. Meeting Tommy and Sarah made Kate realize she needed to help her children understand how fortunate they were and encourage them to use their advantages to help others who were less lucky. William was having similar thoughts about his role as a father and as a future king. The royal family had resources and influence that could make real differences in people's lives. But sometimes the formal nature of their duties made it easy to forget the individual human stories behind the statistics and charity reports. Tommy and Sarah had reminded him that behind every cause they supported were real people with real struggles who deserved personal attention and care. As they approached the outskirts of London, Kate called ahead to cancel their evening plans. She explained to their staff that they wanted to spend the evening with their children, sharing Tommy and Sarah's story and presenting the handmade bracelets. This was not a night for formal dinners or official engagements. This was a night for family, for gratitude, and for remembering what really mattered in life. The busy traffic and tall buildings of London seemed overwhelming after the quiet simplicity of the small northern town they had just left. Kate and William both felt like they were returning to a different world, one where people worried about things that suddenly seemed much less important. They had spent only a few hours with Tommy and Sarah, but those hours had given them a new perspective on their own lives and responsibilities. William reached over and squeezed Kate's hand as they neared Kensington Palace. Neither of them needed to say what they were both thinking. They had gone to the hospital hoping to bring comfort and joy to two sick children, but Tommy and Sarah had given them far more than they had received. The brave little boy and girl had taught them lessons about living with purpose, finding joy in small things, and never giving up hope even when facing the most difficult circumstances. The palace gates came into view as the sun began to set, marking the end of a day that had started like any other, but had become one of the most meaningful experiences of their lives. Kate and William knew they would never forget Tommy and Sarah, and they were already planning ways to honor the children's examples of courage and kindness in their own future work and family life. That evening, Kate and William gathered their 3 children in the comfortable sitting room at Kensington Palace. The room was filled with toys and books, evidence of a happy childhood that suddenly seemed even more precious after their visit to the hospital. George, Charlotte, and Louis had been playing together when their parents returned, and they were curious about why their mother and father seemed so serious and thoughtful. They could sense that something important had happened during their parents' mysterious trip. Kate and William sat down on the carpet with their children, choosing to make this conversation feel informal and comfortable rather than like a lecture. They wanted George, Charlotte, and Louis to understand the importance of what they were about to share. William began by explaining that they had met 2 very special children that day, kids who were about the same ages as the royal children, but who were facing much bigger challenges than anything they had ever experienced. George, who was 8 years old like Tommy, listened carefully as his father described the brave little boy who had been fighting cancer for 3 years. William explained that Tommy lived in a hospital instead of a house, that he had to take strong medicines that sometimes made him feel sick, and that he might not get better like most children do when they catch a cold or hurt themselves. George's eyes grew wide as he tried to imagine what it would be like to be sick for so long. Princess Charlotte, who was 6, asked many questions about Sarah and her dreams of becoming a teacher. Kate told her daughter about how Sarah helped other children with their homework, even when she felt terrible, and how she wrote stories to make scared children feel better. Charlotte was amazed that someone only a little older than herself could be so helpful and brave. She wanted to know if Sarah had friends at the hospital, and if she missed going to regular school. Little Prince Louis, who was only 4, had trouble understanding why Tommy and Sarah had to stay in the hospital for so long. Kate explained in simple words that sometimes people get very sick and need doctors and nurses to take care of them for a long time. Louis asked if Tommy and Sarah's mommies and daddies stayed with them, and he seemed relieved when Kate assured him that their families visited them every day and loved them very much. Then came the moment Kate and William had been looking forward to all day. Kate carefully opened the special box containing Tommy's handmade bracelets and explained that Tommy had spent weeks creating these gifts specifically for them. She told the children about Tommy's careful color choices and how he had woven each of their initials into the patterns using golden thread. The children watched in amazement as Kate showed them the intricate details of Tommy's work. George was the first to receive his bracelet, and he held it carefully in his hands as if it were made of precious jewels. The blue and silver threads caught the light from the window, and George could clearly see where Tommy had woven the letter G into the pattern. He was quiet for a long moment before asking if Tommy had really made this just for him, someone Tommy had never even met. When Kate confirmed this was true, George's expression became very serious and thoughtful. Charlotte squealed with delight when she saw her pink and purple bracelet with its tiny silver beads. She immediately wanted to put it on and admired how pretty it looked on her wrist. But when Kate explained how long it had taken Tommy to make the bracelet and how he had worked on it even when he felt sick, Charlotte became more subdued. She asked if she could write a thank you letter to Tommy, and Kate's heart swelled with pride at her daughter's thoughtfulness. Prince Louis received his bright green and yellow bracelet with the same excitement he showed for all new toys, but he seemed to sense that this gift was different from his usual presents. Kate helped him put the bracelet on his small wrist and explained again that a little boy named Tommy had made it specially for him. Louis announced that he loved his bracelet and wanted to wear it every day, which brought tears to Kate's eyes. The children had many questions about Tommy and Sarah after receiving their bracelets. They wanted to know what the hospital looked like, what Tommy and Sarah did all day, and whether they had toys to play with. William and Kate answered each question honestly but gently, helping their children understand the reality of serious illness without frightening them. They explained that even though Tommy and Sarah were facing scary situations, they had found ways to be happy and to help other people. George asked if they could visit Tommy and Sarah themselves, wanting to meet the children who had made such beautiful gifts for them. Kate and William exchanged glances, both touched by their son's desire to reach out to the sick children. They explained that the hospital was far away and that Tommy and Sarah needed to rest and receive their medical treatments, but they promised to find ways for the children to send messages and gifts to their new friends. Charlotte decided she wanted to make something for Tommy and Sarah in return for the beautiful bracelets. She asked if she could draw pictures for them and maybe write letters telling them about her favorite games and books. Kate encouraged this idea, knowing that Tommy and Sarah would treasure anything the royal children created for them. The act of making gifts for others would also help George, Charlotte, and Louis understand the joy that comes from giving. As the evening continued, the royal children played with their regular toys, but they kept looking at their new bracelets and talking about Tommy and Sarah. Kate noticed that Charlotte was being extra gentle with her baby dolls, pretending to take care of them like nurses take care of sick children. George seemed more thoughtful than usual, and he asked several more questions about what it was like to be in a hospital for such a long time. Before bedtime, the three children made a pact to wear their bracelets every day and to think about Tommy and Sarah whenever they looked at them. They wanted to remember how lucky they were to be healthy and to live in a beautiful palace with their family. Kate and William tucked their children into bed that night, knowing that Tommy and Sarah had already begun to influence their family in positive ways, teaching all of them valuable lessons about courage, gratitude, and kindness. 3 days after their visit to the hospital, Kate and William were having breakfast with their children when William's phone rang. The caller identification showed the same number from the small northern hospital that had started their incredible journey just a few days earlier. William's stomach tightened as he answered the call, somehow knowing that this conversation would be different from the first one. Kate noticed the change in his expression immediately and quietly moved closer to listen. The voice on the other end belonged to Nurse Helen, but her tone was completely different from the hopeful excitement she had shown during their first conversation. Her words were gentle but heavy with sadness as she delivered the news that Kate and William had been dreading but somehow expecting. Tommy had passed away peacefully in his sleep during the early hours of the morning, surrounded by his parents and the medical staff who had become like family to him over the years. William felt his throat tighten as he listened to Helen describe Tommy's final days. She told him that Tommy had been talking about his visit with the prince and princess right up until the end, sharing the story with every nurse, doctor, and cleaner who entered his room. Tommy had been so proud of the time he had spent with Kate and William, and he had shown everyone the photographs Kate had taken of him with the bracelets he had made for the royal children. Helen's voice cracked slightly as she continued, explaining that Tommy's last few days had been some of his happiest, despite his declining health. He had been full of energy and joy after their visit, as if meeting his heroes had given him a final burst of strength and purpose. Tommy had spent hours telling his parents about every detail of their conversation, describing how kind and genuine Kate and William had been and how Princess Kate had the most beautiful smile he had ever seen. The little boy had also been excited about the promise that his bracelets would be given to the royal children. Tommy had asked his mother several times if she thought Prince George would really wear the blue and silver bracelet and whether Princess Charlotte would like the pink and purple one he had worked so hard to make perfect. Even as his condition worsened, Tommy continued to talk about his royal visitors and how happy they had made him feel. Tommy's mother had asked Nurse Helen to call Kate and William personally to share a special message. She wanted them to know that their visit had been the greatest gift Tommy had ever received, better than any toy or treat he could have imagined. In his final conversations with his parents, Tommy had said that meeting the prince and princess had made him feel like the most important little boy in the whole world. He had felt valued and loved by people he had only dreamed of meeting. Kate took the phone from William when she saw tears streaming down his face. Helen repeated the story to her, adding details about how Tommy had been showing off the teddy bear Kate had given him to everyone who visited his room. He had named the bear Princess Kate and had been sleeping with it every night since their visit. Tommy's parents wanted Kate to know that the simple gift of a stuffed animal had brought their son immense comfort during his final days. The news hit Kate harder than she had expected. She had known that Tommy was very sick and that his time was limited, but somehow she had hoped for a miracle. The 3 hours they had spent with Tommy had felt so full of life and possibility that it was difficult to accept he was really gone. Kate found herself thinking about Tommy's bright smile and his excited chatter about the bracelets he had made for her children. Helen also shared that Tommy's parents had specifically requested that Kate and William know how their visit had affected not just Tommy, but his entire family. Seeing their son so happy and excited had given Tommy's parents some of their own happiest memories from the difficult final months of his illness. They would forever be grateful that two busy, important people had taken time out of their lives to make their little boy feel special and loved. A hospital staff had also been deeply moved by the royal visit and its impact on Tommy. Nurse Helen explained that Tommy's joy had been contagious, lifting the spirits of other patients and even the medical staff who were struggling with the sadness of losing children they had grown to love. Tommy had spent his last days telling other sick children about his royal visitors, encouraging them to stay brave and hopeful, just like he had been. William asked about funeral arrangements, wanting to know if there was anything he and Kate could do to support Tommy's family during this terrible time. Helen explained that Tommy's parents had requested a simple, private service, but that they would be honored if Kate and William wanted to send flowers or a message. They understood that royal schedules were complicated, but they wanted Kate and William to know they would always be welcome if they wished to pay their respects. After ending the phone call, Kate and William sat in stunned silence for several minutes. Their children were still eating breakfast nearby, unaware that the little boy who had made their special bracelets would never make another one. Kate and William both struggled with how to share this news with George, Charlotte, and Louis, knowing it would be their children's first real encounter with death and loss. The grief they felt surprised them both with its intensity. They had known Tommy for only a few hours, but his courage, kindness, and joy had touched their hearts in a profound way. Kate found herself crying not just for Tommy, but for his parents who had lost their brave little boy, for Sarah who had lost her best friend, and for all the other children in that hospital who were fighting similar battles every day. William held Kate close as they both processed the sad news, knowing that Tommy's death would change them forever. The little boy who had started as a stranger's wish had become a teacher, showing them what true courage looked like and reminding them of what really mattered in life. Though their time with Tommy had been brief, his impact on their family would last forever. In the weeks following Tommy's death, Kate and William found themselves thinking about the brave little boy almost every day. They had attended his funeral, a simple but moving ceremony, where Tommy's parents shared stories of their son's incredible spirit and the joy he had brought to everyone who knew him. The small church had been filled with nurses, doctors, other families from the hospital, and children from Tommy's school who remembered his kindness before he became too sick to attend classes. Kate and William knew they needed to do something meaningful to honor Tommy's memory and continue the work he had started during his short life. After many conversations with Tommy's parents and hospital staff, they decided to establish a special fund in Tommy's name. The Tommy Johnson Foundation would provide financial support for families dealing with childhood cancer, helping to pay for things like travel expenses to visit sick children, special equipment to make hospital stays more comfortable, and educational materials for children who missed school due to illness. The Foundation's first project was expanding the bracelet-making program that Tommy had started. Kate and William arranged for art therapy teachers to visit the pediatric ward regularly, teaching other young patients how to create their own bracelets and crafts. The money earned from selling these handmade items would go toward buying gifts and treats for children who were having particularly difficult days. It was a perfect way to continue Tommy's tradition of helping others, even while facing his own challenges. Sarah had been devastated by the loss of her best friend, but she found comfort in working with the foundation to honor Tommy's memory. Kate had kept her promise to send teaching materials to Sarah, and the young girl had been using them to help other children in the hospital with their schoolwork. Sarah's reading corner had become a popular gathering place where kids could escape from their medical treatments and lose themselves in stories and learning. Kate and William also made sure to follow through on all the promises they had made to Tommy and Sarah during their visit. They sent regular updates about their own children to Sarah, including photos of George, Charlotte, and Louis wearing their special bracelets. The royal children had indeed worn the bracelets every day since receiving them, and they often asked their parents to tell them more stories about Tommy and Sarah. The most touching tribute came from an unexpected source. George, Charlotte, and Louis had been so moved by Tommy's story that they asked if they could start their own charity project. With their parents' help, they began making care packages for children in hospitals, filling boxes with books, games, art supplies, and handwritten notes of encouragement. The royal children worked on their project every week, carefully selecting items they thought sick children would enjoy. Every year on Tommy's birthday, Kate and William made a special trip back to the small hospital where they had first met him. They would spend the day visiting current patients, bringing gifts and spending time with children who were fighting battles similar to Tommy's. These annual visits became some of the most meaningful events on their royal calendar, reminding them why their work was so important and keeping Tommy's spirit alive. The hospital staff had created a special memorial garden in Tommy's honor, with a bench where families could sit and remember their loved ones. Kate and William had contributed to the garden, which featured Tommy's favorite flowers and a small plaque describing his legacy of kindness and courage. The garden became a peaceful place where current patients could go to think and find hope, knowing that other children had faced similar challenges with grace and strength. Sarah continued to thrive despite her ongoing health challenges, eventually becoming well enough to return to school part-time. She never forgot her promise to become a teacher, and she worked harder than ever to achieve her dream. Kate maintained their correspondence, sending encouraging letters and educational materials that helped Sarah stay motivated during her most difficult days. Sarah's determination to help other children learn and grow was a living tribute to the friendship she had shared with Tommy. Kate still wore a special bracelet that Tommy's mother had given her after his funeral, made from the same colorful threads Tommy had used for his creations. The bracelet served as a daily reminder of the lessons Tommy had taught her about finding joy in small things, helping others despite personal struggles, and living each day with purpose and love. William carried a small photo of Tommy in his wallet, a reminder of the boy who had changed their perspective on what truly mattered in life. The impact of their brief encounter with Tommy extended far beyond the immediate family and hospital staff. The story of Kate and William's spontaneous visit to grant a dying child's wish had inspired people around the world to reach out to children in their own communities who needed support and encouragement. The Tani Johnson Foundation received donations from ordinary people who wanted to honor the memory of a little boy they had never met, but whose story had touched their hearts. As the years passed, Kate and William often reflected on how much their lives had been changed by one phone call on an ordinary morning. Tommy had taught them that true nobility came not from titles or ceremonies, but from acts of kindness and service to others. His legacy lived on in every child helped by the foundation, every family supported during their darkest hours, and every person inspired to show more compassion in their daily lives. The day Kate and William paid tribute to Tommy had indeed left them weeping, but those tears have been transformed into action, hope, and lasting change. Tommy's brief life had created ripples of kindness that would continue spreading for generations, proving that even the smallest acts of love can have the most profound impact on the world.